Today is my daughter's first day of kindergarten. Come home and take her there right now. I took the call from my eldest son's wife, Maria, at my late husband's funeral, and I was so taken aback by the way she said it that I let out a huh in response. You do know that today is my husband's funeral, right? Yes, I know. So what? Isn't it more pathetic to keep thinking about someone who's gone forever? Maria dismissed my trembling question with those words. Even over the phone, I could imagine her looking down on me with her characteristic upturned eyes. I was left speechless, without the strength to argue back. Understood. I bit my lip hard, trying not to let the tears fall. Little did Maria know, she would come to regret underestimating the strength of our family. My name is Sally Nathaniel, 71 years old. At over 70, in the midst of my twilight years, my family consists of 4 members. My husband Mike and our 2 sons, Tom and Theo. Mike and I met at work. We were both high school teachers. Mike was transferred to a different school in the same district after a while, so we only worked together for a few years after getting married. I took maternity leave when we had kids and ended up stepping away from teaching. Our children are Tom and Theo. Theo was a handful during his teenage years, getting mixed up with the wrong crowd at school and causing trouble in various ways, which led to many apologies. It's a funny story now, but it was quite the concern back then. Tom was gentle and indecisive. Far from causing trouble, he didn't even go through a rebellious phase. Shy about standing out, his hobbies were reading and math, growing up to be the exact opposite of his brother. Yet, I think both of them are very honest and good kids. Now both of them have grown up to be admirable individuals. Tom leverages his strength in science as a salesman in an IT company, while Theo, perhaps making use of his wild days, is a professional boxer. Tom lives at home and Theo lives alone, so it's rare for the entire family to gather, but we make it a point to meet at least once a year. My family has always been my safe haven and my emotional support. However, those peaceful days were suddenly disrupted. One day, before going to work, Tom said he had something important to discuss. What could it possibly be? Maybe he's quitting his job? While I was pondering various possibilities, Tom came home early, followed by a young woman with a noticeable baby bump. A few minutes after, letting them in and taking a sip of tea, Tom began to speak. I'm getting married to her. What? That statement was so unexpected that both Mike and I exclaimed at the same time. Can you explain what's going on? Mike asked, with a tone that seemed to command not just himself but the atmosphere of the room. Yeah. She's Maria. She works at the reception of my company. Tom started with a rather awkward introduction. And yet, despite being introduced, Maria herself just sat there, not attempting to say a word on her own. So, we were, dating, or more like, it just happened. Tom's explanation was hard to listen to. Mike began to frown, and I thought he was about to intervene if Tom continued in that vein, but Maria, sitting next to him, cut in. I'm pregnant. I'll be entering my final month in another month. Mike and I gasped. The way she said it, so matter-of-factly, did not seem to match the gravity of the news. Tom, is that true? Mike asked again. It's natural for a parent to want to hear it from their own child. Tom, resigning himself, swallowed audibly and began to speak with a quiver. Yes. His voice was barely above a whisper. I almost let out a sigh. Why didn't you tell us sooner? I only found out about it a week ago myself. Until then, Maria was just off work, and I hadn't heard anything. But, first of all, Maria? How old are you? I looked at Maria sitting in front of me and was at a loss for words. Maria looked significantly younger than Tom. Plus, despite being pregnant, she wasn't dressed in maternity clothes. She wore a miniskirt and a top that was low-cut enough to reveal her cleavage. Moreover, she sat there without saying anything, like a child who had been brought along. Me? I'm 26. 26? Tom is 38 this year. Surprisingly, there's a 12-year age gap between them. Anxiety rushed over me, and I felt like I might collapse. Can you two properly raise this child? Tom, can you support them? Contrary to my feelings, Mike composed himself and asked with a commanding voice. His eyes fixed directly on Tom. I want to live with Maria and the child. Tom said, looking back at Mike with determination, a stark contrast to his previous hesitance. I was taken aback by his gaze. Understood, Mike finally said, and Tom's gaze relaxed only when he heard the answer. Though I don't know much about Maria, her smile seemed shadowed, lifting only at the corners of her mouth. The child was born right on the due date. She, Kaya, was named after Maria's suggestion. I thought a different name might be better, but since Tom agreed, I didn't have a say. Eventually, we decided to have a small wedding ceremony with just the family. Maria appeared to be estranged from her relatives and said she had no one to invite to the wedding. Moreover, the wedding was so sudden that inviting people was difficult. And then there was another problem. That was about what to do regarding our living arrangements after getting married. Since Tom was still living at home, this caused a lot of concern. Maria had been raised in a facility and had lived alone since high school. Paying rent while raising a child and both working seemed impossible. I understood this, having taken maternity leave myself. After discussing it with Tom, we decided Maria would also live in our family home. I was strongly against it. Why should we have to let someone we hardly know, and who isn't even friendly, into our home? Recently, she asked me with a smirk, "Do you dislike children, mother-in-law?" When I asked, "Why do you think that?" she replied, "You don't seem to show much affection, do you?" I couldn't believe she would say such a thing to the mother of the person she was marrying. Moreover, she always seemed to single me out for confrontation within the family. Additionally, childcare was mostly left to others. Maria constantly dumped it on Mike and me, while she wandered off somewhere. I became concerned about where she was always going. Unable to overlook Maria's attitude and actions any longer, I decided to talk to Tom. "What do you like about Maria?" "Well, I guess it's that she relies on me. You know, Maria had a complicated family and a lot of past issues. She might seem tough on the outside, but she's actually really kind." "I see," Tom said, looking happily at his wedding ring. I couldn't say anything more. Kaya is growing up healthy and strong. This year, she's finally starting preschool. Children really do grow up fast. Maybe it's just because I love children, but I found myself reminiscing. I remember when you two did things like this. Perhaps because Maria doesn't do much parenting, Kaya has become very attached to her grandparents. Honestly, I feel there's something off about Maria's way of interacting with children. Kaya seems to be afraid of Maria. Even when I mentioned it to Tom, he dismissed it as me worrying too much, so I decided to just wait and see. However, something terrible happened. Mike collapsed. Early in the morning, a loud thud echoed throughout the room. When I went to check, Mike's pulse was already weak, and it was too late by the time we called an ambulance. I phoned everyone in the house and Theo to go to the hospital and receive the doctor's explanation. The diagnosis was an acute myocardial infarction. We were allowed to see Mike one last time in the morgue. When I peeked under the cloth covering his face, Mike looked so peaceful, as if he were just sleeping. I expressed my gratitude to him in my heart. We decided to hold Mike's funeral sometime soon. Everyone in the family, except for Maria, attended. Mike's altar was beautifully decorated, and in the center, there was a photo of Mike smiling, taken during our first shrine visit of the year. Before the cremation, we said our final goodbyes and offered flowers. Thanks to the makeup, Mike looked different from when we saw him in the hospital. His skin had a brightness to it, as if he really were just sleeping. Surrounded by many flowers, Mike's peaceful face seemed even happier. Then my cell phone in my bag started vibrating. Since we were on our way to the crematorium and had some waiting time, I stepped out to the lobby to check it. It was a call from Maria. "Yes? Maria, what's going on?" "What's going on? Hurry up and come back," she demanded with incredible urgency the moment I answered. She must know that today is Mike's funeral. Maria's angry voice continued rapidly. "Today is Kaya's first day of kindergarten. Come back and take her there right now." I was taken aback by her demand. I hadn't heard anything about Kaya's kindergarten start, and moreover, why couldn't she take her herself? "You do know that today is Mike's funeral, right?" "Yes, I know." "So what? Isn't it more pathetic to keep thinking about someone who's gone forever?" Maria dismissed my trembling question with those words. "If you don't want to, I have my ways. You see, I happen to know some pretty scary people." I was speechless, and Maria, sensing my silence, taunted me over the phone. Even without seeing her, I could imagine her looking down on me with her characteristic sneer. I was so drained, I couldn't muster a reply. All right. Then, hurry up and come, she laughed and hung up, leaving me with the dial tone. I bit my lip, trying hard not to cry. Mom, what's wrong? We need to get going soon. Theo said, noticing me standing still. Sorry, I have to go back home.
What? Why?
His surprise was understandable. Theo had only met Maria a few times at the wedding and family gatherings. I told him about Maria's behavior and the content of the call I just received. Then, that's just wrong. I can't stand to see Mom sad because of someone like her. But if I don't go, she said she'll call scary people. Scary people, huh? So she's resorting to threats. Theo's words were truly kind, and they soaked into my parched heart, but if I didn't go, I didn't know what might happen. Tears started flowing uncontrollably. Okay, then let's have Tom drive you. I'll handle things here. Theo said, patting my back and calling for Tom. They whispered something to each other, but I was too overwhelmed to hear anything. I'm sorry this is happening, Mom. Tom murmured in the car on the way home. There was no other conversation. As we approached the house, I saw a black van parked in front, a vehicle I didn't recognize. It was parked right in front of our house, giving off an ominous vibe. Could Maria have actually called those scary people she mentioned? Despite having cried so much in the car, the addition of fear made it seem like I was going to start crying all over again. I entered the house hiding behind Tom's back. As we opened the front door, it made a loud bang sound. Wondering what was going on, we hurried to the living room, where we found Maria dressed flamboyantly. But she wasn't alone. There was another man, someone I didn't know. He was strong-looking and grabbing Maria by the collar. I couldn't understand what was happening. As I stood there dumbfounded, the man looked at us and said, "Sorry to intrude. I'm Theo's #1 disciple," he announced with the tone of someone from a sports team. Theo's subordinate? But why was he here, and how did this situation come about? While I was panicking but trying to make sense of the situation, Tom slowly stepped forward towards Maria.
Tom, do something.
Maria desperately appealed to Tom while being grabbed. She tried to free herself from the man's strong grip, but his arm strength was overwhelming, and she couldn't move him. However, as Tom approached, the man quickly released Maria. Why do I have to go through this? Maria said, fixing her appearance. But then, in the next moment, Tom, usually gentle, grabbed Maria by the collar with trembling hands.
What?
I was shocked to see Tom do such a thing, and Maria looked just as surprised. Tom just glared at Maria sharply. And I realized, since entering the house, Tom hadn't seemed surprised by anything. Normally, if there was a stranger in the house, you'd expect anyone to be surprised, but what's going on? I'm overthinking so much that my head feels like it's about to spin. What the heck are you doing? You broke something very important to me. The usually considerate Tom was nowhere to be found. He spoke slowly, squeezing out each word. But the words filled with anger formed a solid mass and overflowed.
Apologize to Mom,
Tom said with a straight look. It had been years since I saw my son raise his voice like this. Or maybe, this was the first time. A Tom I had never seen before was standing right in front of me. What are you even saying? It's not my fault, you're the weird one here. You love me, don't you? But his passion did not reach Maria. She snorted through her nose, looking down on him with her usual disdainful look, mocking him. And then, Maria spoke in a seductive, cajoling tone. I felt disgusted by her. I didn't even want her in my field of vision anymore. In the next moment, a voice as loud as an earthquake resonated through the house.
Not only me, but you also treated my family horribly. You're the worst kind of person,
Tom declared, and with that, he pushed Maria back by the collar she was grabbed by. Ah. Maria fell on her buttocks in a comical way, and the sound of her tight skirt ripping could be heard as she fell. Seeing Tom transformed, Maria blinked in surprise. I was shocked too, but more than that, I felt a sense of relief as if Tom had voiced all the anger I had been feeling. I know all about what you've been doing behind my back, Tom said, pulling out an letter-sized brown envelope from his bag and slamming it into Maria's hands. The thrown envelope hit the ground, spilling its contents. Inside were photos of Maria walking closely with several men. With this as evidence, I'm divorcing you. Wait, hold on. I also took a closer look at the photos, which indeed showed Maria with different men. From the photos scattered on the ground, it looked like there were 3 or 4 men. And these photos, showing them being affectionate in the streets or coming out of dubious places, clearly suggested a romantic relationship.
What? This?
I couldn't help but exclaim. Among them was a photo with a delivery man who always comes to our house. There were photos taken at night and others in broad daylight. Seeing all this evidence, I was convinced. Maria was going out every day, not caring for Kaya. Living carefreely while cheating, all while Mike and I were diligently looking after everything. The fact that I couldn't stop this situation from happening made me feel guilty towards Kaya.
No, that's a lie. You can't possibly leave me over something like this,
Maria said, her voice mixed with an eerie chuckle. Her face showing a terrifying expression that seemed almost insane. We'll see about that. It's you who can't let go, isn't it? Tom said unflinchingly, looking at her as if she were something pitiful. With that one line, Maria was completely knocked out, remaining silent and looking down. It's okay, thanks. From here on, just as Theo said, please. Yes, sir. You were awesome, just like Theo's brother should be. Tom passed the message to Theo's disciple standing there. Then the disciple took the seated Maria and left the house with her. Maria's last expression was so eerily blank and unfocused, it seemed like something out of a nightmare. The front door slammed shut, and in the now quiet room, I finally let my tensed body relax. Perhaps because I had been so tense until now, a wave of exhaustion hit me, and I plopped down on the sofa. Hearing the silence, Kaya emerged from the back room. Her eyes crusted with tears, possibly from crying earlier. Tom gently picked her up. Just now, an unknown man came in. He said he was going to get rid of the bad person, so I should stay in my room. She began, tears welling up in her big eyes again as she started rubbing them with her hands. Worried she might irritate her eyes further, Tom gently wiped them with a tissue. Then Kaya whispered, "Mom's gone, isn't she?" In that moment, both Tom and I understood. To Kaya, Maria wasn't seen as a mother but as the bad person. "Yeah, she's gone."
Yee.
Tom replied slowly, and Kaya's face lit up with genuine happiness. Clinging to Tom, she looked up at him with her eyes sparkling and started talking again.
Daddy, I love you. You got rid of Mom, didn't you?
Huh? Why do you think that?
Because the man said Daddy would protect me. Daddy's my hero, right?
Faced with Kaya's question, Tom answered with a laugh, showing a mix of sheepishness and reliability. From now on, I'll try my best to be that. Kaya looked puzzled but stopped crying after Tom stroked her head. Seeing my bewildered state, Tom explained everything to me. It turns out, Tom knew about Maria's affairs but had kept silent. However, troubled by whether to continue ignoring it, he consulted Theo, who then recommended a service that investigates infidelity, and thus he had evidence at hand. If I had known all this, I would have advised him to divorce her right away. In the middle of Tom's explanation, I couldn't help but get angry, wondering why he had endured all this. The reason he hesitated was largely because of the child. No matter how unpleasant Maria's actions were, to Kaya, she was the only mother in the world, and that was something that couldn't be changed no matter how hard anyone tried. But hearing Kaya's words earlier, Tom regretted not divorcing sooner, holding his head in his hands. Part of his hesitation also stemmed from a lack of confidence in himself. Tom had been deeply in love with Maria, and feeling liked by her had given him a sense of self-assurance. However, he gradually began to feel a distance growing between him and Kaya, and Maria's affection for him waning, which led to his indecision. He was scared of what would become of them if things continued as they were, Tom shared. Now, looking at Tom calmly talking about himself, I felt reassured. There had been something off about Tom since he met Maria. Love is blind, they say, and it was certainly true in his case. It turns out, the courage to make a decision and clear his doubts came thanks to Theo. Before coming to the house, Theo had whispered to him, apparently telling him, only you can decide who you truly care about. At that moment, Theo had also mentioned sending his disciple over to the house, making it possible for Tom to make the choice he wanted to make right there and then. Really? Sometimes I can't tell who's the older brother, Tom said, somewhat embarrassed.
I'm really sorry for everything up until now. But this family is what's important to me,
Tom said, looking me straight in the eyes. I couldn't help but shed tears of happiness this time. When we hurried back to the crematorium with Kaya, Theo greeted us with a smile, saying, "Oh, you're back." The funeral home was in quite a panic. The reason for the panic there was that some strong-looking men seemed to be keeping an eye on the staff. "Theo, what's all this about?" "These guys are some old friends of mine. I told them we needed to wait before proceeding with the cremation, but they wouldn't stop, so I had them come over to keep things under control." I internally questioned if this was another form of intimidation, but since it allowed us to make it in time for the cremation, I decided to let it slide just this once. The funeral proceeded without further issues from then on. The Adam's apple was beautifully preserved in the ashes, a rarity, as mentioned by the crematorium staff. Hearing this, our family shared a knowing smile. With Mike's affairs settled, Tom immediately proceeded with the divorce. Maria had no intention of parting ways and took a combative stance, so Tom presented the evidence in court and was able to cleanly end their marriage. Tom was granted custody of Kaya, and on top of that, Maria was ordered to pay $20,000 in compensation. Out of kindness, Tom decided not to pursue child support from Maria, who had neglected her parenting duties and left everything to Tom after quitting her job. She's now desperately job hunting and working part-time. Afterwards, our family managed to regain our happy life. Tom has been doing his best as a father, with me supporting him along the way. With Maria's absence, Kaya has become much more lively and cheerful than before. Theo occasionally comes home to play with Kaya. Mike's portrait on the family altar now seems to smile even more happily, seeing our family back to its original state.